The sky fell quiet. Mark's day had been ordinary. Office meetings, emails, the usual rush-hour drive. But as the sun began to set, casting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, the ordinary was about to unravel into something extraordinary. Mark stood in his kitchen, wiping his hands after finishing the dishes when a faint hum vibrated through the house. He paused, frowning. The hum grew louder, deeper, like the steady approach of something enormous. His heart skipped a beat. He stepped outside, squinting into the fading light. The sky above his house was bathed in twilight, and to his disbelief, a sleek, metallic craft was descending silently into his yard. The craft's surface reflected the last rays of the setting sun, gleaming like a giant, airborne silver droplet. Mark had never seen anything like it, not even in the wildest sci-fi movies. The wind stilled, the birds were silent, and there, in the middle of his neatly trimmed lawn, the spacecraft landed with the gentlest of thuds. He was momentarily frozen, a strange blend of terror and awe flooding through him. The air felt charged, almost electrified, as if the presence of something truly otherworldly was bending the very atmosphere around it. Mark had been prepared for this moment, at least in theory. He had clicked through dozens of forms on an intergalactic employment site, convinced it was an elaborate joke or a prank set up by some tech genius. Intergalactic maids for hire, the ad had said, promising efficiency, professionalism, and a diverse range of services. We understand Earth's unique needs, it boasted, and for some reason, Mark had clicked apply. Maybe it was out of boredom, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was because cleaning was the one part of his life that felt perpetually out of control. But now, as the hatch of the craft slowly opened, Mark realized he hadn't actually expected it to work. A hiss of air escaped the ship, and from the growing mist, two figures appeared. The first to emerge was Sarah, towering and slender, with an ethereal grace that made it clear she wasn't human. Her skin shimmered with a subtle, almost translucent quality, like pearls dipped in liquid moonlight. Her hair, deep black and laced with streaks of silver, cascaded over her shoulders and down her back, reflecting the dim evening light. Her eyes, huge, almond-shaped, and glowing faintly violet, locked onto Mark immediately. She didn't blink. Mark's mouth went dry. Following close behind was Leo. Smaller, less intimidating, with an air of innocence that contrasted sharply with Sarah's composed demeanor. Leah's skin was a soft shade of turquoise, glowing faintly in the dim light, and her snow-white hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. Her bright jade eyes, wide and curious, darted around as she took in the sights of Earth for the first time. She smiled at Mark, though it seemed more out of nervousness than confidence. For a moment, Mark just stood there, gripping the railing of his front porch as though it was the only thing tethering him to reality. These weren't just cleaners stepping out of an Uber. These were beings from another galaxy, sent here to work for him. The absurdity of it all hit him at once. "Greetings," Sarah spoke first, her voice smooth and melodic, carrying the kind of calm authority that made Mark instantly feel like he was in the presence of someone, or something, important. "You must be Mark. I am Sarah, and this is Leo. We have arrived as agreed. We are at your service." Mark opened his mouth to reply, but found himself struggling for words. He had prepared a dozen questions, but they all evaporated under the weight of the moment. Instead, he nodded awkwardly. Yes. Welcome to Earth. And my house," he stammered. Leo grinned, her enthusiasm bubbling up as she bounced on her toes. "It's so different. Earth smells fresh," she said, her English slightly stilted, but understandable. Mark blinked. He had never considered what Earth might smell like to an alien. We have a lot of trees and plants," he managed to say. "They're everywhere." Leo nodded vigorously. "I like it. So many new things to learn." Sarah smiled politely, though she seemed less interested in small talk. Her gaze was more focused, as if she was already calculating and processing her environment. We understand the scope of our duties here, she said. Household maintenance, cleaning, and assisting with any daily needs. We are efficient and adaptive, as the agency promised. We will begin immediately. Mark swallowed hard. Immediately, like, right now. Without a word, Sarah stepped forward, her tall, graceful frame moving with purpose. She scanned the exterior of the house, her violet eyes glowing faintly. Yes, she said, our job is to make your life easier, and we do not waste time. Mark barely had a moment to protest before Sarah and Leo were already inside the house, moving with a level of coordination that seemed impossible. Sarah examined the living room, her fingers moving delicately over the furniture, while Leo, smaller and quicker, darted into the kitchen, opening cabinets and observing every surface with wide-eyed fascination. Mark hurried after them, his heart racing. Wait, hold on, I haven't even shown you around yet. Leo giggled, opening the refrigerator and peeking inside. So much food. Earth has great food, right? She said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. I've read so much about it. Sarah, meanwhile, ran her hand over the coffee table in the living room, seemingly unimpressed by the layer of dust that had accumulated there. You should know, Mark, that we come from a very different environment. Our standards of cleanliness and order are advanced. Mark winced. Yeah, I haven't had time to clean up lately. Leah laughed, closing the fridge door with a soft thud. That's why we're here. Don't worry. We'll get everything sorted out in no time. As Mark watched them move through his home, aliens, here in his suburban house, casually taking over his chores, he felt the full weight of the situation finally settle in. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a joke. Sarah and Leo were real, and they were here to stay. And his life was about to get a whole lot weirder. An alien approach to cleaning. The first morning with Sarah and Leo in his home felt nothing short of surreal. Mark awoke to the smell of something unusual, a mix of spices and aromas he had never encountered before. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, and yet the house was already alive with the quiet hum of activity. He shuffled out of bed, still groggy, and made his way down the stairs, rubbing his eyes as he tried to make sense of it all. When he reached the kitchen, the sight that greeted him made him pause at the doorway. Sarah and Leo were already hard at work. Sarah was carefully arranging the spices on his counter in some complex, logical pattern, her long fingers moving gracefully over the small jars and containers as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Leo, on the other hand, was seated at the table with her face close to a strange device, resembling a cross between a tablet and a holographic projector, watching images of Earth kitchens with fascination. Neither of them noticed him at first, and Mark took the moment to observe them more closely. He still couldn't wrap his head around how different they were from anything he had imagined. Their alien features weren't threatening or grotesque. In fact, they had a strange beauty, a serenity in their movements and presence. But it was obvious they didn't come from Earth. The glow of their skin, the odd angles of their bone structure, the way their eyes seemed to reflect light in a slightly unnatural way, it was all subtly disorienting. Finally, Leo noticed him and smiled brightly. "Good morning, Mark," she chirped, her jade-green eyes twinkling. "We've been researching Earth kitchens. Did you know there are over 3,000 different types of spices humans use in cooking? That's incredible." Mark blinked, still processing the fact that there was an alien maid at his kitchen table. Yeah, I guess we have a lot of spices," he replied slowly, stepping further into the room. "What are you doing?" Leo beamed. "We're adapting," she said proudly. "It's important for us to learn how humans operate in their homes. There's so much variety. Earth customs are fascinating." Sarah, without looking up from her meticulous rearranging of the spice rack, added, "We need to ensure that the efficiency of your home is optimized according to both Earth and intergalactic standards." Mark opened the fridge and stared at the neatly organized rows of food. Everything had been arranged by category, vegetables in one section, fruits in another, and the drinks lined up in order of height. It looked like something out of a high-end restaurant's cold storage. He closed the fridge and turned back to them, still trying to process what was happening. "This is a lot," he said, unsure of what else to say. Leah hopped off her chair, grinning from ear to ear. "Wait until you see what we've done in the living room. We've optimized the space according to gravitational flow and energy alignment. You'll feel so much more comfortable there now." Mark wasn't entirely sure what gravitational flow was supposed to mean, but Leo grabbed his hand and eagerly pulled him toward the living room before he could protest. When they reached it, he was surprised to find that, while everything looked mostly the same, there was a definite change in the atmosphere. The furniture had been rearranged slightly, and the lighting somehow seemed softer, more natural. There was a peaceful, calming energy in the room that hadn't been there before. How did you do this?" Mark asked, genuinely impressed. He had never considered the idea that the arrangement of furniture could affect how a room felt, but now he couldn't imagine it any other way. Sarah, who had finished her task in the kitchen and was now standing in the doorway, nodded approvingly. "It's a technique we use on our home planet to align living spaces with natural energy flows," she explained. "It promotes balance and harmony." Leo beamed with pride. "It's like feng shui, but better," she added, referencing the earth concept she had clearly researched overnight. Mark sat down on the couch, which seemed more comfortable than ever before. It was like the cushions had been replaced with something softer, though he hadn't seen them do anything to it. "This is amazing," he admitted. "I didn't expect this level of detail." Sarah inclined her head slightly. "It is our job to enhance your living experience," she said, her voice steady and calm. "We are here to make your life easier and more enjoyable." Leo giggled and plopped down next to Mark on the couch, her curiosity never fading. "Is it working? Do you feel more at ease?" Mark had to admit that he did. Despite the surreal nature of having alien maids in his house, there was something undeniably relaxing about the changes they had made. The house felt cleaner, more organized, and somehow more alive. "Yeah," he said after a moment, leaning back into the cushions. "It's actually kind of nice. I didn't know I needed all this." Leo's smile widened. "Good. We're just getting started. There's still so much more we can do." Sarah, however, interrupted with a more serious tone. "There is one aspect we must address, Mark. Your cleaning methods." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your current cleaning supplies are primitive," Sarah said, her violet eyes locking onto his with a seriousness that made him feel slightly judged. "We will need to upgrade your tools if we are to maintain optimal standards." Mark's confusion deepened. "Primitive? I mean, they work fine for me. It's just cleaning, right?" Sarah shook her head, her silver hair shimmering in the light. "Not just cleaning. Maintaining an environment is crucial for both physical and mental well-being. The tools you use are inefficient. We will introduce you to more advanced methods." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Advanced methods? Like what?" Leo jumped in, clearly excited to share. "We have nanotech cleaners. They're super tiny robots that can clean on a microscopic level. They'll handle everything, even the stuff you can't see. Dust, bacteria, grime, all gone in seconds." Mark's jaw dropped. "You have nanobots for cleaning?" Sarah nodded, her expression as serious as ever. "They are highly efficient. With them, your home will remain spotless at all times." Mark could hardly believe it. "So, you're telling me I'll never have to clean again? Like ever?" Leo giggled. "Pretty much." The thought of never having to vacuum, scrub, or dust again was more than a little tempting. But the idea of having tiny robots crawling around his house was strange. "Are these safe?" he asked, glancing between Sarah and Leo. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Of course, they are harmless to biological organisms. Their only function is to clean." Mark leaned back, considering it. The idea of living in a perfectly clean house, maintained by advanced alien technology, was too good to pass up. "All right," he said finally. "Let's give it a shot." Leo practically bounced with excitement. "Yes, you won't regret it," she said, already pulling out a small device from her pocket. As the tiny cleaning units were activated and sent to work, Mark watched in awe as they darted around the room, invisible to the naked eye but unmistakable in their efficiency. His home, once cluttered and chaotic, was now pristine and filled with a sense of peace he had never known. Maybe this alien maid thing wasn't such a crazy idea after all. The first unexpected challenge. Mark's house had never been so immaculate. It felt almost surreal, like living in a museum where everything was perfectly placed, polished, and pristine. The alien maids, Sarah and Leo, had exceeded every expectation. Their meticulous attention to detail, combined with their advanced technology, had transformed his home into an almost futuristic sanctuary. But despite the perfection, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He hadn't touched a broom or vacuum in days, and while that was supposed to be the perk of hiring intergalactic help, it left him with a strange sense of unease. The house was too quiet, too clean, almost like it wasn't really his anymore. This sense of calm was shattered one evening when Sarah approached him with a serious expression, her violet eyes gleaming in the dim lighting. Leo, who was usually bubbly and full of life, stood quietly beside her, an unusual look of concern crossing her turquoise features. "Mark," Sarah began, her melodic voice tinged with urgency, "we have detected an anomaly." Mark, who had been sitting on the couch enjoying the peace, furrowed his brow. "An anomaly? What kind of anomaly?" Sarah's expression remained composed, but there was a hint of tension in her posture. "There is a disturbance in the energy flow within the house. It is something we did not anticipate." Leo, unable to contain herself, blurted out, "There's something weird going on. We've picked up unusual readings from the basement, like really strange ones." Mark's heart sank. The basement. He hadn't been down there in ages. It was mostly used for storage, old furniture, holiday decorations, and boxes of random items he couldn't bring himself to throw away. "Strange how?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah folded her arms, her iridescent skin shimmering slightly. "We've detected what appears to be a fluctuating energy signature. It doesn't align with any of the standard Earth electromagnetic fields, nor with any of our known technologies. We believe it may be a source of interference." Mark blinked. "Interference with what?" "With the nanobots," Leo explained. "They've been acting off. Like, they're working, but not as efficiently as they should be. We think the anomaly is messing with their programming." Mark stood up, suddenly feeling uneasy. "Are you saying there's something down there that's interfering with your tech? That doesn't make sense. The basement's just full of old junk." Sarah remained calm, though her gaze intensified. "It may not be something you are aware of. There are energies and forces on Earth that even humans have not fully understood." Mark swallowed, his mind racing. He had heard enough stories, urban legends, old ghost tales, and unexplained phenomena that seemed to plague the world. He wasn't exactly the superstitious type, but the idea of something lurking in his own home, hidden in the dark corners of his basement, sent a chill down his spine. Leo tugged at his sleeve, her wide jade eyes pleading. "Please, can we check it out? Just to be sure it's nothing dangerous." Mark hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, all right, let's check it out. But I'm telling you, there's nothing down there but boxes and cobwebs." Together, the three of them made their way to the basement door. Mark switched on the overhead light, casting a dim yellow glow down the staircase. It had always been a little creepy down there, cold, quiet, and filled with the smell of dust and damp wood. He hadn't realized just how much he had neglected the space until now. As they descended the stairs, Leo activated a small handheld scanner, her face lit up with curiosity and apprehension. The basement was as Mark remembered it, cluttered with forgotten furniture, boxes stacked high against the walls, and shelves filled with items he hadn't used in years. There was nothing out of the ordinary. See? Just old stuff, Mark said, gesturing toward the mess. No anomalies here. But Sarah wasn't convinced. Her eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made Mark nervous. The energy signature is strongest in this area, she said, pointing toward the far corner of the room, where an old, heavy trunk sat gathering dust. Mark frowned. That trunk had been there for as long as he could remember. He had inherited it from his grandfather years ago, but he had never bothered to open it. It was too heavy to move, and he had always assumed it was filled with nothing but old, forgotten memorabilia. Leah's scanner beat loudly, the screen flashing with red signals. It's coming from inside the trunk, she said, her voice hushed. Mark swallowed hard, suddenly feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. That old thing, there's no way. Sarah stepped forward, her movements calm and measured. We need to open it, she said firmly. It may hold the key to the interference. Mark hesitated, but his curiosity and the growing sense of unease pushed him forward. He crouched down in front of the trunk, wiping away the thick layer of dust that had accumulated on its surface. The metal latch was rusted and stiff, but with a little effort, it popped open with a loud creak. As he lifted the heavy lid, the three of them leaned in, their eyes fixed on the contents of the trunk. At first glance, it looked like nothing special, just old books, papers, and a few trinkets that had probably belonged to his grandfather. But nestled among the papers, at the very bottom of the trunk, was something Mark had never seen before. It was a small metallic object, no bigger than a fist, shaped like a disc with strange, intricate symbols etched into its surface. It emitted a faint, pulsating glow, the light shifting between shades of blue and green. Leo gasped. What is that? Mark stared at the object, his mind racing. I have no idea, he whispered. I've never seen this before. Sarah stepped closer, her expression unreadable. This is the source of the energy anomaly, she said quietly. It's not from Earth. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. What do you mean, not from Earth? Are you saying this thing is alien? Sarah nodded slowly, her violet eyes locking onto his. It is possible that this object is of extraterrestrial origin. Its energy signature is unlike anything we've encountered before. It could be a form of technology or something much older. Leah's eyes widened with excitement. This is amazing. We've just found something incredible, right here in your basement. Mark didn't share her enthusiasm. His mind was spinning, trying to comprehend what he was looking at. But how did it get here? Why was it in my grandfather's trunk? Sarah studied the object carefully. That is something we will need to investigate further. For now, we must be cautious. We do not know what this object is capable of. Mark nodded, though his hands were shaking slightly. The reality of what they had just discovered was overwhelming. So, what do we do with it? Sarah's expression was serious. We will need to analyze it, but first, we must ensure that it is not a threat to your home or to you. Mark stood up, still staring at the glowing object in disbelief. His quiet life had taken a sharp turn into the unknown, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. I just wanted some help with cleaning, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Leah grinned, her enthusiasm unshaken. Hey, who knew your house was hiding a secret alien artifact? This is going to be fun. Mark sighed. Fun wasn't exactly the word he used. But one thing was certain, his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The artifact's awakening. The glowing object, now carefully placed on the kitchen table, became the center of attention for the next few days. Mark, Sarah, and Leo had spent countless hours staring at it, debating its origins and what it could possibly mean. Mark's initial shock had subsided somewhat, but a new sense of responsibility weighed on him. He couldn't deny it any longer. This was no ordinary discovery. Leo's excitement was palpable. We have to figure out how this thing works, she exclaimed, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. It could be ancient alien tech, something your grandfather stumbled upon without even realizing it. Sarah, on the other hand, remained far more cautious. She studied the object intensely, her violet eyes narrowing whenever she approached it. "We must be careful, Mark," she warned for the 100th time. "We do not know what kind of energy we are dealing with. It could be harmless, or it could be extremely dangerous." Mark wasn't sure what to think. The glowing disc was mesmerizing, and despite Sarah's warnings, it didn't feel threatening. In fact, the gentle hum it emitted was almost soothing, like white noise in the background of an otherwise chaotic world. Still, there was the unsettling question: how had it ended up in his grandfather's old trunk? Had his grandfather known what it was? And why hadn't he ever mentioned it? One evening, as the three of them gathered in the living room, Mark decided it was time to do some digging. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking the silence. "Maybe there's something in the house that can tell us more about my grandfather and how he got this thing. He was always traveling, collecting old stuff. Maybe this was part of one of his expeditions." Leah's eyes lit up. "Like an adventure. I love adventures." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained serious. "That would be wise. If we can find any documentation, letters, journals, anything, it might help us understand how he came into possession of the artifact." Mark stood and led the way back to the basement. This time, they weren't looking for hidden energy signatures. They were searching for clues about his grandfather's life, his travels, and, hopefully, the strange alien artifact. As they sifted through the boxes, Mark realized just how little he knew about his grandfather's past. He had always been a quiet man, more interested in his own hobbies and sharing stories with his family. But after hours of searching, they finally found something: a weathered leather-bound journal hidden among stacks of old maps and postcards. Mark opened it slowly, the pages brittle from age. His grandfather's neat handwriting filled the pages, each entry carefully dated and detailed. It wasn't until they reached the middle of the journal that things started to get interesting. April 15, 1972. The expedition to the Peruvian mountains has yielded extraordinary results. We found the cave, just as the locals described, though nothing could have prepared us for what we discovered inside. An ancient structure, covered in unfamiliar symbols, and deep within it, the artifact. Mark's heart raced as he read aloud. He found this thing in a cave in Peru. Sarah leaned in, her eyes scanning the page. This could explain its origins. Many ancient cultures had interactions with extraterrestrial beings, though most of that knowledge has been lost or buried over time. Leo, ever the optimist, grinned. "Your grandpa was like an Indiana Jones of alien relics. How cool is that?" Mark chuckled despite the tension. "Yeah, I guess he was." But the journal entries became more ominous as they continued. His grandfather's excitement over the discovery quickly turned to concern. May 3, 1972. There is something about the artifact, a power we do not understand. It hums with energy, but the locals refuse to touch it. They say it is cursed, that it brings misfortune to those who disturb it. I didn't believe them at first, but now, strange things are happening. Equipment failures, people falling ill. I fear we have uncovered something best left forgotten. Mark's voice faltered as he read the last sentence. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with unease. He knew, Mark whispered, he knew it was dangerous. Sarah stood up, her expression grim. "It seems your grandfather understood the risks but chose to bring the artifact home anyway. This complicates things, Mark. We need to make sure it doesn't affect you the way it affected him." Leo, always the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, at least nothing strange has happened to us, yet. I mean, other than discovering a super cool alien object." Mark wasn't so sure. The more they learned about the artifact, the more uneasy he felt. And then, as if on cue, the lights in the basement flickered. Leo froze, her wide eyes darting around the room. "Okay, maybe I spoke too soon." Sarah was instantly alert, her posture tense. "Mark, we need to leave this space now." But before anyone could move, the artifact began to glow brighter, the soft hum intensifying into a sharp, piercing sound. Mark's heart raced as he turned to look at the object on the table. The glowing symbols on its surface were shifting, rearranging themselves into patterns that hadn't been there before. "What's happening?" Mark shouted, his voice barely audible over the growing noise. Sarah pulled him toward the stairs. "The artifact is activating. We don't know what it's capable of. We need to get out of here now." But Mark hesitated. His grandfather had kept the artifact for decades without any major incidents. Was it really dangerous? Or was it simply reacting to their presence? As the noise reached a deafening pitch, Mark made a split-second decision. "I'm staying," he shouted, yanking his arm free from Sarah's grasp. "I need to know what this thing is." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mark, you can't." But it was too late. The artifact's glow had reached a blinding intensity, and suddenly, the room was filled with a brilliant flash of light. Mark felt a surge of energy ripple through him, a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't think. He was suspended in a strange liminal space, caught between worlds. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded. The noise stopped. Mark blinked, disoriented, as he found himself standing alone in the basement. Sarah and Leo were gone, and the artifact lay still on the table, its glow reduced to a faint flicker. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around. The basement was eerily quiet, but something had changed. He could feel it. An invisible force, something far greater than himself, had awakened. He glanced down at the artifact, now pulsing softly in the dim light. "What did I just do?" he whispered to himself, his voice trembling. In the silence that followed, Mark realized that the artifact was no longer just an ancient relic. It was alive, and it had chosen him for reasons he couldn't yet understand. And whatever those reasons were, his life would never be the same again. A rift between worlds. Mark's head spun as he stood frozen in the eerie silence of the basement, the faint pulsing glow of the artifact casting soft shadows across the room. The realization that Sarah and Leo had vanished hit him like a punch to the gut. The energy surge, the flash of light, it hadn't just been a strange phenomenon. It had done something. "Sarah? Leo?" Mark called out, his voice shaky as it echoed through the basement. No answer. Panic began to set in as he ran up the stairs, calling out their names again, his voice rising with each step. He checked every room in the house, empty. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Breathing heavily, he stumbled back down to the basement, his eyes fixated on the artifact still pulsing with energy. He hadn't meant for this to happen. He had only wanted answers. Now, not only was he alone, but two sentient beings, his alien maids, his strange and unexpected companions, were missing because of him. The journal. Mark darted back to the weathered journal he had left on the table, flipping frantically through its pages. His grandfather had been afraid of the artifact for a reason. There had to be something in the journal that could help him reverse whatever had just happened. But the journal didn't provide any clear answers. There were more entries, some detailing his grandfather's attempts to understand the artifact's powers, but none offering a solution. It was as if his grandfather had simply given up, resigned to keep the artifact hidden and dormant for as long as possible. June 30, 1972. I have tried everything. The artifact responds to some stimuli, but remains unpredictable. I fear it holds a power we are not meant to control. The more I study it, the more I am convinced it is a key, though to what I do not know. A key, Mark muttered, his eyes darting to the glowing disk. A key to what? And what had he just unlocked? The pulsing of the artifact was steady now, its light softer, almost calming, yet Mark knew better. Something had changed, and it wasn't just the sudden disappearance of Sarah and Leo. The very air in the basement felt different, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. Suddenly, a low hum reverberated through the room, growing louder with each passing second. Mark's heart pounded as he turned back to the artifact. The symbols on its surface were shifting again, rearranging themselves into new patterns, and the air around it began to ripple like heat waves on a summer day. The space in front of the artifact seemed to distort, bending reality itself. And then, just as quickly as it had started, a tear in the air appeared, an actual rip in the fabric of reality, a shimmering, swirling portal that hung in the middle of the basement. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had seen enough science fiction movies to know what this looked like, but the reality of it was far more terrifying. A portal. He had opened a portal. Without thinking, Mark stepped closer, his eyes wide with disbelief. Through the shimmering tear, he could make out what looked like another world, a place bathed in soft, ethereal light, with towering structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The air on the other side shimmered with colors he had never seen before, and strange shapes moved in the distance. Could Sarah and Leo be there? Had the artifact sent them to this other world? Mark's heart pounded in his chest. He had no choice. He had to go through. If Sarah and Leo were on the other side, he couldn't leave them there. And if this portal really was connected to the artifact, then it might be his only chance to bring them back. Taking a deep breath, Mark steeled himself and stepped forward. The moment he crossed the threshold of the portal, a strange sensation washed over him, like being submerged in warm water, his body tingling as the unfamiliar energy enveloped him. And then, just like that, he was through. Mark blinked as he found himself standing on solid ground again, the portal shimmering behind him like a distorted mirror. The world he had stepped into was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering crystalline spires jutted out from the ground, reflecting the soft pastel light that bathed everything in a surreal glow. The air was warm, filled with the faint hum of energy coursing through the strange landscape. The sky above was a deep, swirling purple, and in the distance, Mark could see other structures, impossibly tall, their forms bending and twisting as if gravity itself were an afterthought. But there was no time to marvel at the alien beauty around him. He had to find Sarah and Leo. "Sarah, Leo," he called out, his voice echoing through the crystalline landscape. No response. Mark took a cautious step forward, scanning the horizon. In the distance, he spotted a figure, a silhouette moving slowly among the towering spires. His heart leaped. It had to be them. Without hesitation, Mark began to run, his feet crunching against the crystalline ground. As he drew closer, he realized the figure wasn't Sarah or Leo. It was something else. Someone else. The figure turned, revealing a tall humanoid form with elongated limbs and shimmering skin that seemed to change colors with every movement. Its eyes were large and glowing, its expression unreadable. It stood still, watching Mark with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Mark froze, his mind racing. This was clearly an alien, unlike any he had ever imagined. Was it friendly? Hostile? Had it seen Sarah and Leo? Before he could say anything, the alien spoke, its voice a deep, melodic hum that resonated in his mind as much as his ears. "You do not belong here, human." Mark swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. I'm looking for my friends, two beings, an alien named Sarah and another called Leo. Have you seen them?" The alien tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. "They do not belong here either. They are lost, as are you." Mark's heart sank. "Please, if you know where they are, help me. I didn't mean to come here, but I can't leave without them." The alien regarded him for a long moment, its gaze piercing. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it raised a hand and pointed toward the distant horizon. "They are not far. But this world is dangerous for your kind. You must leave before it is too late." Mark nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'm not leaving without them." The alien's expression remained unreadable, but it stepped aside, gesturing for him to go. "Then hurry, human. Time does not work the same here. What you seek may already be lost." Mark didn't wait for further explanation. He bolted in the direction the alien had indicated, his heart pounding in his chest. The landscape seemed to blur around him as he ran, the crystalline structures shimmering and shifting like mirages. He could feel the strange energy of the world pulsing around him, warping reality in ways that made his head spin. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was finding Sarah and Leo. In the distance, he spotted two figures, familiar shapes, standing close together near the edge of a towering crystalline spire. His heart leaped with hope. "Sarah, Leo," he shouted, his voice hoarse. The figures turned, and Mark's heart surged with relief. It was them. But as he drew closer, he realized something was wrong. Sarah's expression was tense, her eyes wide with alarm. Leo looked equally shaken, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with fear. "Mark," Sarah called out, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have come. This place, it's alive. It's trying to keep us here." Mark skidded to a stop in front of them, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I'm not leaving without you." Sarah shook her head, panic flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. This world, it's a trap. The longer we stay, the harder it will be to leave." Leo nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "We've been trying to find a way out, but it's like the world is shifting around us, keeping us from leaving." Mark's mind raced. The alien had warned him, but he couldn't just abandon them. There had to be a way to escape. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, the crystalline structures vibrating with an ominous hum. Mark's heart pounded as he looked around, panic rising in his chest. "We need to move, now," Sarah shouted, grabbing his arm. Mark didn't hesitate. Together they ran, the landscape warping and twisting around them as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. The portal was still open, but it was shrinking, the shimmering tear in the air growing smaller with each passing second. "We have to make it," Mark shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening hum of the world collapsing around them. With a final burst of energy, they leaped through the shrinking portal just as it closed behind them, the alien world disappearing in a flash of light. They landed hard on the basement floor, gasping for breath. The artifact lay dormant once again, its glow completely extinguished. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Sarah spoke, her voice shaking. "We can't stay here anymore, Mark. That artifact, it's more dangerous than we ever imagined." Mark nodded, his heart still racing. He didn't need to be told twice. But even as they gathered themselves and prepared to leave, one thing was certain: the artifact had awakened something far greater than any of them could comprehend. And whatever that was, it wasn't finished with them yet. Secrets of the artifact. The basement felt smaller now, its walls closing in on Mark, Sarah, and Leo as they sat in the dim light, still reeling from the near disaster. The air was thick with tension, their breaths still shallow as the weight of what had just happened settled on their shoulders. Mark's mind churned, trying to process the chaotic events. The alien world they had glimpsed was unlike anything he could have ever imagined. A place where reality itself bent and shifted, a place that was alive and actively trying to trap them. But more troubling than the world they had just escaped was the artifact now lying silent and dormant on the basement floor. It looked harmless enough, its surface cool and dark, with no trace of the energy it had released earlier. Yet Mark knew better. He knew the truth now. The artifact was a key to something much larger, something more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. Sarah stood first, pacing in tight circles, her face still pale from the shock of what they had been through. That was close, too close. Her voice was low, almost to herself, but the tension in it was palpable. "We can't stay here anymore. This thing," she gestured toward the artifact, "is beyond us." Leo, sitting quietly on the floor, looked equally shaken. Her wide, jade-green eyes stared at the artifact, as if willing it to stay quiet. "It's alive," she murmured, echoing Sarah's earlier words. "The world on the other side, it was like it didn't want us to leave." Mark's stomach twisted at her words. He had felt it too, the world closing in around them, trying to keep them trapped. It hadn't just been a strange place, it had been a predator, waiting for its prey to slip up, and they had barely escaped its grasp. "We have to destroy it," Mark said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "The artifact, it's too dangerous. We don't know what it's capable of, and I don't think we can control it." Sarah stopped pacing, her expression conflicted. Destroying it might not be that simple. We don't even know what it is or where it came from. For all we know, breaking it could unleash something worse. Mark frowned, her words gnawing at his gut. She had a point. The artifact was ancient, powerful, and clearly connected to something far beyond their understanding. Destroying it might be like lighting a match in a room filled with gas. It could be catastrophic. Leo, ever the optimist, perked up slightly. "Maybe we can figure out what it really is. There has to be some way to understand it better. Maybe then we'll know how to deal with it safely." Mark nodded slowly. As terrifying as the thought of keeping the artifact around was, it was better than risking a reckless decision. But if they were going to learn more, they needed help. "The journal," Mark said, moving to the table where his grandfather's journal lay. "My grandfather wrote a lot about the artifact, but I haven't read everything yet. There might be something in here, something we missed." As Mark flipped through the journal's yellowed pages, Sarah and Leo gathered around him, their faces taut with anticipation. His grandfather's handwriting was neat but hurried, as if he had been racing against time to record everything he could before it was too late. Mark skimmed entry after entry, hoping to find some clue, some explanation. Finally, he found a page that stood out. The entry was dated shortly before his grandfather had stopped writing altogether. "August 15, 1972, I have uncovered more of the artifact's mysteries. It is not merely a key, but a conduit, a bridge between dimensions. Its power comes from the world it is linked to, and I fear that world is aware of us. It watches, it waits. I have seen glimpses of what lies beyond, and it is not just a place. It is a living, sentient force. I believe it is trying to pull something from our world into its own, something it needs to sustain itself. I must be cautious. If the connection grows too strong, it could mean disaster." Mark's blood ran cold as he read the words aloud. A living, sentient force? A bridge between dimensions? His grandfather had known far more than he had let on, and the implications were staggering. The artifact wasn't just a random object, it was part of something far greater, a mechanism for opening a portal between their world and the alien one they had just escaped. Sarah's eyes widened. "So, it's not just a key, it's alive, and it's trying to bring something here." "But what?" Leo asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What could it want from our world?" Mark shook his head, his mind racing. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it can't be good." The room fell into a tense silence as they absorbed the weight of the revelation. The artifact wasn't just dangerous, it was a ticking time bomb, and the longer it remained in their possession, the more they risked losing everything. "We have to do something," Sarah said, her voice tight. "If it's trying to pull something into our world, we can't just sit here and wait for it to happen." Mark nodded grimly. "But we can't destroy it without knowing the consequences. We need to figure out how to sever the connection, how to break the link between the artifact and that world." Leo stood, her eyes bright with determination. "Maybe there's someone who can help us, someone who understands this kind of thing better than we do." Mark glanced at her, unsure. Who would even know where to start with something like this? "My grandfather barely scratched the surface, and he spent years studying it." Sarah crossed her arms, thinking. There are people out there, scientists, researchers, who've dedicated their lives to studying alien artifacts and phenomena. We need someone with expertise, someone who can help us figure out what this thing is really doing. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're right, but we need to be careful. If the wrong people find out about this, we could be in even more danger. The artifact is powerful, too powerful, and I don't trust anyone with that kind of power." Leo nodded. "We'll have to be selective. Reach out to someone we can trust." Mark looked at the artifact again, its dormant surface hiding the untold danger within. They couldn't keep running from it. The time for caution had passed, and the only way to ensure their safety, and the safety of the world was to understand the full extent of its power. With a deep breath, Mark made his decision. We'll contact someone with the knowledge we need, but until we figure this out, we have to keep the artifact safe. No one else can know about it. Sarah and Leo exchanged a glance but nodded in agreement. They had come too far to let fear control them now. Whatever the artifact wanted, whatever it was trying to pull into their world, they would stop it. The air in the basement felt heavier now, the weight of the responsibility settling on their shoulders. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, there was something else: resolve. They would uncover the secrets of the artifact, no matter the cost, and when the time came, they would face whatever lay on the other side of the portal once more. But this time, they would be ready.